Right, so preventing ocean plastics. So Pew started looking at the plastics issue about 2016, 2017 in detail. And we were very much interested to see where it would be a good fit for Pew in terms of what we actually were going to do. So we started doing some research, and what we found was that there were a number of sort of radical propositions being made. But we felt that a lot of them were unreconciled. So a lot of people were talking about banning plastics. Some people thought we could burn our way out of the plastic problem, actually just incinerate it all or bury it. Some people thought, well, just keep polluting and we'll just clean it up as we go along. Other people thought that we should focus just on recycling, and recycling was the way out of it. And then other people thought that we could actually just come up with new substances, biodegradable plastics, and that would be the solution. And what we found that there was not a lot of research between any of these, and they were unreconciled. And we felt that in order to actually present something, some sort of pathway to a solution, we really need to do a lot more research. The sorts of things that we wanted to find out were, how do these strategies perform on environmental, economic and social indices? How applicable are they to materials and geographies? What costs and investment would be required to ramp these different approaches up? And how quickly could they be implemented? And also, how do these strategies actually interact with one another? And so we basically embarked on a 2-year research project, resulting in the report Breaking the Plastic Wave. We worked in partnership with Systemic and also working closely with Oxford University, University of Leeds, Ellen MacArthur Foundation and Common Seas to produce Breaking the Plastic Wave. But because there was so much analysis, and Pew is very protective of its reputation for good science, the organisation asked us to actually produce a science paper before we released Breaking the Plastic Wave. So we had to take all of the methodologies that we used and have them peer reviewed and have them published in a science paper before we could release Breaking the Plastic Wave. And so that's what we did. And I think it was on the 21st of July 2020 at 2 o'clock, Science released a science paper, peer reviewed science paper on the methodologies behind the report. And then at 2:10, we released the report itself. So what makes this report different to many of the others that we've seen? Firstly, there was a focus on solutions, quantitative analysis, upstream and downstream, and as I said before, economic, environmental and social dimensions. We applied a lot of scientific rigor and diverse input. The whole of the research was done in consultation with 17 sort of core experts. There's some of them there. And they're from all geographies and the full value, the plastics value chain as well. But in addition to that, we actually had over 100 experts involved, and everything was peer reviewed. It was a first of its kind system-wide model. I should mention that behind Breaking the Plastic Wave is actually a MATLAB model developed by Oxford University. It's very comprehensive and dynamic system model and has has 68 differing variables. It's broad scope, it covers all geographies and the entire value chain. It's also highly granular. We have 8 different geographic archetypes, 3 plastic categories and 4 microplastic categories. And it's also probably the most up-to-date, and it's also open source. Pew is a charitable trust, and so everything we do is not for profit. And we're just actually working with Oxford University to host the latest version of this model, which I'll talk about in a little while. So, very quickly, what does the model actually tell us? I'm going to talk, I could talk for an hour and a half on what the model does and how much information is in the report, but I'm just going to pull out a few key headlines. So what the model shows is that plastic waste generation is set to double by 2040. The actual leakage to the ocean will treble, and that's partly down to a disproportionate growth in plastic waste in countries with low collection. And this will actually result in the amount of plastic stock in the ocean quadrupling by 2040. We call this the 2, 3, 4 times sort of table. The other thing that we looked at was, what is the role of governments and companies? We hear a lot about what companies are doing, what governments are doing to reduce plastic pollution. And we were able to plot current commitments against a business as usual scenario. I mean, just to recap, the business as usual scenario sees us going from about 11 million tonnes going into the ocean today to close to 30 million tonnes by 2040. And current commitments would only make political and corporate commitments would only make 7% difference to that total. The other thing that we were able to show is that there were no silver bullets. So at the start of the presentation, I talked about the different propositions, and we were able to do an analysis of these different propositions and how effective they would be against that business as usual projection. And so we modeled some of the single solution strategies. So for instance, we looked at the recycling strategy, and our analysis showed that such a strategy would result in plastic leakage still 65% above what it is on today's levels if we just focused on recycling. We looked at reduce and substitute, collect and dispose. And what we found was, at best, single solution strategies would keep us at the 11 million tonnes we are today. But the positive news was that if we were to do all of these strategies to the best of our abilities, we could look at an 82% reduction in business as usual projections. So, and that 82% reduction we called the system change scenario. So this is the sort of well-used wedges diagram, which sort of shows that system change scenario. And it's able to show that, as you can see, by 2040, under the system change scenario, 30% of business as usual plastic demand could be reduced, 17% could be substituted, 20% could be recycled. So there's lots of information around this, and for me there are a lot of positives that we can actually address the plastics pollution. There were some other takeaways that I think are important to mention as well, because they do come up in conversation. Rapid growth in plastic production, it's doubling between now and 2016 and 2040. Why is this? A lot of it is down to the fact that virgin plastic is actually cheaper than recycled plastic. Investment in oil and gas infrastructure is much greater than it is in investments in solution and innovation around plastics. And of course, the externalities of plastic pollution is not priced into plastic production, manufacturing, and waste management. Another area I think of interest is around the areas of high leakage. One of the biggest growing areas of plastic production is what we call film. And by that, I don't mean cling film. What I mean is lightweight films. It could be sweet wrappers. It could be, peel off tops of tubs or containers. All that very lightweight plastic. Some of it is multi-layer, but the problem we have with it is that it's very difficult to collect, both physically and economically. You have to remember that in the informal sector, where people are paid by weight, and so if you had to pick thousands and thousands of little bits of plastic in order to get a kilogram of plastic to recycle, it's really not practical. So what happens is people pick the larger stuff, such as the water bottles. And what is interesting as well is that a large beverage company a few years ago did actually, and I think they came at this from the right perspective. They thought, well, let's reduce the amount of plastic in our water bottles. And of course, that, when you're being paid by weight, has the opposite effect. Yes, it's reducing the amount of plastic you use, but it means that that water bottle is not worth as much as it was before in the informal sector. And that kind of brings me on to the final point from the report that I wanted to highlight, which is the collection gap. A lot of people say, look, we just need to increase collection, advanced waste management in all of these countries. Putting aside the fact that even in our own country, in the UK, we export a lot of our recycled or recyclable plastic to other countries and other developing countries that don't have the infrastructure that we have. The fact of the matter is that there are currently around about 2 billion people who don't have access to collection, and this is projected to increase to 4 billion people by 2040. So that would mean that if we were to meet that objective of let's just increase collection in all these countries, we'd have to connect 500,000 people per day, every day for the next 20 years. And you have to remember that many of these countries that are not going to prioritise waste collection over an education system or premium healthcare or healthcare for the population. So I just wanted to very quickly just focus on next steps for Pew. This report, Breaking the Plastic Wave, has informed us as much as I hope it's informed many other people. And so going forward for us in the next few years, we're focusing on taking the Breaking the Plastic Wave model. And actually we've designed it now, changed it from being a global model so that we can use it on a country basis or even a city basis. And we're looking to work with countries. The model will show us how the plastic flows through their waste system, so we can identify areas where there could be focus of policies or focus of investment in order to maximize reductions in losses to the ocean. We also think that being able to do this on a national policy basis with countries will be supportive of the Global Plastics Treaty. We've currently done a pilot in South Africa, and we're working on a pilot in India as well. We're also looking at policy measures. We're working on an EU level on microplastics. So this is very much focusing on tyres, textiles and pellets. Also on international trade policy, many companies are banning certain problematic plastics. So if companies are banning them, can countries stop trading them as well? You know, that's a trade policy that we want to explore. And of course, both of these, what we call model policies, could be some things when completed that could feed into a global treaty. The big ticket item for us is on disclosure and reporting. We are working to take the disclosure and reporting we currently have for things like carbon and wood and water and actually apply that to plastic. So, you know, 20 years ago, companies were asked to report on carbon. It's gone from being voluntary to starting to become mandatory. Big investment houses like BlackRock now will not let companies into their investment portfolio unless they report on carbon. So can we do the same for plastics? We think this will provide accountability for corporate commitments. It'll influence investment decisions both by companies and by public investors. And it can also bolster efforts by government to regulate plastic use and pollution. Finally, our final piece of work is we're going to update Breaking the Plastic Wave. We've not had a lot of criticism about the report because of the science paper that's been produced. And of course, the figures that I've used are the ones that were used by the UN when they announced the treaty. So it's widely used as a sort of basis for where we are with plastic pollution at the moment. But we want to update it with new data in 2025, some of the data that we'll be collecting ourselves, so that we can actually track progress and keep momentum on the plastics pollution problem. So I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present to you all. And if you would like to download a summary of the report or even the full report, you can do so at that web address, or just go to the Pew website and or just Google Breaking the Plastic Wave Pew, and it'll take you to the right space. Thank you very much.
So I'll be, taking it on from Simon. I'll be sharing a few case studies around cities that have looked into circular economy at some level, if not 100%, maybe they've tried to address 50 to 70% of the issue of waste management by resource efficiency and circular economy approaches. Just a minute. Yeah. But before that, I think a few slides on why India needs circular and sustainable economy. Clearly, we are a very resource-intensive country. If you look at the figures, the resource extraction is only and only increasing. We are the third largest emitter of GNGs and account for about 9.2% of total world emissions. And given that we aspire to become a global manufacturing hub, clearly the take-make waste linear economic model will not work, and thereby the need to switch to more circular systems across sectors in the country. If we look briefly at the statistics around waste, clearly the numbers are increasing, whether it's municipal solid waste or plastic waste. Most of them are official figures marked in red, but we clearly know that the real-time numbers are much more because these values don't have the quantums of waste that are managed by the informal sector. And we clearly can't afford mountains of garbage. As I sit today in Delhi, the capital of the country, there's a garbage mountain that's on fire. So clearly we can't have hectares of land to be used for disposal, but definitely need systems that are more circular in cities where the focus is more around in situ processing and treatment rather than ex situ approaches. And of course, waste as a sector has a lot of, there's a lot of untapped area, be it in energy generation, be it as biogas, be it as compost, or be it utilization of various resources for upcycling and recycling interventions. These were some studies that we recently did in a few cities in India, wherein UN Habitat is supporting cities in evidence-based planning on solid waste management to look into more circular financing projects around solid waste. And we clearly saw that there are huge quantums of waste which are uncollected, even for cities that per se say that they are the best practice cities. And a lot of it, as you can clearly see, is going to environment, most of it on land, a lot of it on water, a lot of it on, is getting burnt or is going into drains. This is for a city in Trivandrum, Kerala. And the next one is for Mangaluru in Karnataka, where again, a similar pattern has been observed, wherein a lot of plastic leakages are either being retained on land, water, or are burnt or going to drain. So clearly a lot of scope around more circular and upcycling interventions to control the leakages, and a lot of it around social innovation and behavior change as well. And given that presently we only recycle 20% of what is out as plastic waste, there is a huge area, there's a huge scope of improvement when it comes to interventions around circular economy, specifically to plastics. I think I'd deep dive my focus on plastics now. But if I briefly mention journey of circular economy in India, especially around waste, we had the first panel that was constituted on circular economy, which is called the Indian Resource Panel. Very recently in 2017, we had a draft National Resource Efficiency Policy that came in 2019, which is yet to be finalized. And presently a lot of work is happening around developing policy roadmap for circular economy across 7 to 8 prime sectors, plastics and waste being one of them. So clearly, I mean, a lot of work is required, and most of the best practices that we see in the country are either focused or are specifically around these 5 areas. One, wherein cities have either, done a lot of work around social innovation and social engineering that has led to transformation on the ground, wherein there have been effective incentives and financing to make circularity feasible in local businesses, or there's been a roadmap to transition to circular economy for industries, businesses. A lot of this has happened at the national level. Some cities have definitely looked at more of technological and techno-economic innovation on the ground. And all of this is in some sense binded together by a policy roadmap and coordination, both at center as well as state level. Coming to some of the examples of circular cities in India, first, I would talk about Mysuru. It's a million-plus city in the state of Karnataka. And the city has a very famous zero waste management model, which has been there for over decades now. And of course, over a period of time, the city wants to have a more circular approach towards managing its waste. So clearly, households segregate their waste into different sources. Commercial sector is also asked to do so. And all the collected segregated waste goes to 9 zero waste management zones, where it's further sorted into 25 to 30 different categories. And each of the categories is then linked to a processor or a recycler. And the city claims, I've worked very closely with the city, and the city claims that most of its resources are recycled or processed. It makes money out of the waste or the resources that it generates. And it's also a zero landfill city. So Mysuru, in spite of being a million-plus city, has focused on becoming a zero landfill city by adopting a very circular zero waste management model. A lot of it was targeted around developing infrastructure. A lot of it was targeting around social engineering, ensuring that there is awareness, but also ensuring that a lot of it got converted to behavior change. Another city, and this is, I think, a low-cost model which any developing country or any developing city would want to take into is the Ambikapur model. This is a small city in the state of Chhattisgarh in India, where there are about 27,000 households. And I think the novel initiative that the municipality took was that they sort of trained 440 women self-help groups into a local cooperative who are responsible for collection of segregated waste, its standardization into 17 resource centers, and then its segregation into over 150 different categories. So if I have to say which is an Indian city that is looking into segregation and a very low cost circular model into various components, I think Ambikapur tops the chart, because they're not sorting into 25 to 30 or 40 categories, but into about 150 different categories. And after sorting, most of this waste is again linked to various processors, and presently over a period of time, for instance, about 7-8 years now that this model has been set up, not only the city municipality is making money, but the local cooperative also is self-sustainable. It could achieve break even in a span of about 3 to 4 years. And they worked a lot on social development of this cooperative. For instance, typically in cities, these people are the ones that work as informal workers, but today they are binded together as a cooperative. All these workers have health insurance, they have access to very good medical health care, all of them have bank accounts, they have a salary per month of about 200 to 250 USD with a lot of other benefits. And clearly this model has been successful on the ground, and with its success, the state has adopted this model in various other cities. So not only was it successful in just one city, but about 50 to 60 cities within the state have adopted a similar model. The third city, I don't know many of you who know Goa, which is a very touristic state in the country. And Panje is the capital of Goa. It has a very small population of about 35,000, but waste has always been an issue. And though we talk about segregation and circularity, Panje has been a city that has moved from a 5-point segregation, which it has been doing since decades, to a 16-point segregation 2 years back. And of course, this city has had a very robust resource recovery system that has been on the ground since many, many years. So it means, the plastics, various types are getting recycled. Whatever low value component is there, it's going for co-processing to cement plants. And of course, this city again is a zero landfill city. Last year, the city did something very interesting to sort of ensure, that segregation becomes a part of the system, and it sort of continues to do good work in the country on circularity. That it launched a campaign which is quite novel. It's called Shop With Your Waste campaign. And it's more like a barter system wherein your waste becomes your money. So residents are told to segregate their waste into different components, be it the milk pouches, be it PET, be it cardboard, be it low value plastics like MLPs and carry bags and others. And they could go to a grocery shop and take items giving their waste, and then the grocery shop is further connected to a recycler or a processor, and it's a win-win situation for everyone. For the resident, of course, he or she is sorting their waste and they're getting groceries. For the shopkeeper, he's storing clean waste for which he's getting 2-3 rupees extra from the recycler, and for the processor, again a win-win situation, because he's not getting a mixed stream, but he's getting a very segregated clean stream, which allows him for better processing, because many a times low value plastics don't get recycled, or even good quality plastics like PET don't get recycled because they are mixed, which has been a big challenge in India for sure around segregation. So again, this model has been very successful, and it presently is being implemented across the state. Other city that has been known for adopting circularity system past many decades now is Thiruvananthapuram in Kerala. UN Habitat is working with the state as well as the city in making the waste management system more and more circular, and now more focused towards circular financing. So the city, I think the unique thing about the city is that it has been carrying forward a zero waste management model since decades now, wherein households were always trained to manage their wet waste at source. So half of the problem is resolved. I mean, there is, say, only 40% collection of wet waste from household or commercial sources, because rest of the households are trained or equipped enough to manage the waste at source. And the corporation collects only dry waste, which is then channelized to various vendors and then further goes to processing plants for recycling or upcycling interventions. And the state as well as the city has huge subsidies to encourage residents, to encourage commercial players to manage waste at source, which has been a game changer, not even for the state, but also as a model across the country on decentralized zero waste management. So again, it's a city that has adopted a circular model since many years now, since decades now, because of the effort of the government as well as the political will, the social will, as well as the administrative will. Both all the components have sort of worked together here. Then we have Muzaffarpur, which again is a very small city of about 0.5 million population in rural Bihar, which is at least in the north east region of the country, is a city that has worked a lot on a low-cost sustainable model, which is circular. And here the game changer has been awareness. The game changer has been social engineering, and the game changer has been stitching a very broken system together in terms of municipality, in terms of the infrastructure that was there, and of course a lot of work has happened on the ground. Wherein over a period of 3-4 years, the city has processing centers now. The corporation makes money from the sale of compost. All the dry waste resources are connected to a centralized MRF, which then go for processing on a regular basis. And over the years, all these initiatives have also solved the issue of a garbage-strewn city. I mean, earlier, if you would have Googled the city, it was one of the most dirtiest cities in the country. But today, it comes as the top 100 cities on waste management or circular waste management model. So a lot of, and I've been lucky enough to work on this system and to set up this system about 3 years back. And a lot of it has been, I think it's been a game changer case study because of continued efforts that were done on social awareness, on social innovation, on developing skills of various stakeholders, be it the informal sector, be it the waste collectors, be it the municipality, or for that matter, the residents or the commercial areas that were there in the city, which really changed the city in over a period of 3 years now. Another example is of Panchgani, which is a small hill city in western Maharashtra, the western part of the country. And not only is this city a famous hill city, it's also an education hub. And because it's an eco-sensitive zone, the city can't afford to have any centralized systems or incineration plants or waste to energy. And the city sort of adopted a very strict carrot and stick model, wherein if you don't segregate, you're penalized. If you're littering, you're penalized. And it's sort of invested in material processing and recovery to ensure that no plastics is strewn within the city, but almost 100% of it is recycled. Also to note that all these cities are zero waste cities. None of these cities have a landfill as of now, so which is a feat in itself, wherein we're debating about the need to not have landfills, or even if we have landfills, how do we ensure that they're sanitary? Most of these cities have worked on approaches to have no landfills. And of course, it's one of the cleanest hill cities in the west zone of the country, and it's been acknowledged by the government of India. So I think these are some of the prime points on which the city ranks the highest. One, of course, the segregation levels is 100%. And so segregation is practiced in a lot of households and educational institution areas. Wet waste is managed at source, which ensures that dry waste management becomes very robust at the material recovery center, which is there for the city. Another city is Vijayawada, and this would be the last one. Of course, there are many, but again, Vijayawada has sort of worked over the years on strengthening its infrastructure, right from data processing, ensuring evidence-based planning, reducing leakages, but also making models on waste management that are more targeted towards communities. So presently, they have this community kitchen model wherein a lot of institutions, a lot of government offices are sort of linked to biogas plants, both for the toilets as well as municipal solid waste. And they're further connected to a community kitchen where households from low-income group areas can come and cook their morning, evening, and dinner very easily. So these were some of the pictures from a recent visit that I was able to make to the city, and this has worked quite successfully and is being replicated in a few other cities within the country. Wherein you're utilizing biogas to run community kitchens, which are thereby supporting low-income group households that can't afford an LPG or that can't afford a kitchen, and it's running quite successfully. So of course, the lesson is that there are many more such cities that are doing amazing work, and due to a limitation of time, I could only share so much. But what's clear is that these cities and many more in the country, they're spearheading the work on circular economy in India. Many of them are also driving some of the policy lessons that we are taking while we are formulating a policy on circular economy by integrating informal sector, by looking into incentive generation, by looking into effective policy change as bylaws, and they have been widely replicated. Most of these models are not localized, but they've been widely replicated across the state, across the country, and have supported policy change. So in my opinion, these are some suggested readings that you could refer to, some of the documents that have been a part of, and many of the case studies that have been taken from. But when it comes to India, what is clear is that circularity is very much possible. We've been practicing it as a society since long, but a lot of it comes from our frugal ways of living always as a country. And I definitely feel that frugality isn't bad. And being frugal is also acknowledging and knowing the importance of wealth in resources to ensure that they're not wasted. And at least for a country like India, and I'm sure for many other developing countries, this is the base of circular economy. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here, and it was great to hear from the previous speakers, and it was also very, kind of a good introduction to see the examples from India. Well, just a little bit of on WIEGO. WIEGO, Women in Informal Employment, Globalizing and Organizing, is a global action research policy network that seeks to improve the status of the working poor. And we do so having a particular focus on women in the formal economy. And we have been working around increasing organization representation of various sectors in the informal economy through improved statistics and research, through more inclusive policy processes, and advancing more equitable trade, labor, urban planning, and social protection policies. And we have been working for more than 25 years with street vendors, waste pickers, domestic workers, and home-based workers. I have been working for more than 35 years in the area as of waste pickers. I like to call myself a garbologist, and my whole experience here in Brazil in terms of not only as a city officer working in the cleaning agency of my city, Belo Horizonte, in the southeast of Brazil, but also my research work has been around documenting on the contribution, the role and contribution of informal waste pickers, be them, unorganized or organized workers in cooperatives or unions. And we need to, I think we have made a strong progress, a great progress in terms of having a bit more acknowledgement on how waste pickers contribute to city solid waste management systems. But still, there's a lot to be done in terms of recognizing their contribution to the circular economies, to curbing plastic pollution, and to actually being those that in many cities in the developing world are the ones who provide collection services and cities, and thus being kind of subsidizing city systems. And research has indicated how recycling contributes to reduction of emission of greenhouse gas, and these are the frontliners in climate change and also in collecting plastic. And it's important for us to have an understanding, as it was raised by Simon early, the situation of solid waste management, particularly in developing countries, is of great concern. And we know that one person dies every 30 seconds in developing countries from disease caused by plastic pollution and rubbish. And if we think about how waste pickers have been contributing in terms of being those who reclaim all these materials, we should build our solid waste systems, building from what already exists in the cities of the developing world. And we at WIEGO have been documenting this. We have a project called Reducing Waste for Coastal Cities, and we've been working in Dakar, in Accra, in Buenos Aires, and also in Bangalore. And we have been documenting the work done in the cities around how waste pickers prevent marine waste pollution. And we know that some key research have already documented how workers in the informal economy are contributing to solid waste management, plastic pollution, saving the cities, city budgets. The 2010 UN Habitat publication indicated that waste pickers perform between 50 to 100% of all ongoing waste collection in most cities in developing countries. And they are, as we saw in the examples from India earlier, in many contexts, providing work in partnership with cities. In my city, Belo Horizonte, Brazil, we have door-to-door collection of recyclables, and the city has hired through proper contracts the cooperatives, in 8 cooperatives in my city, and this is a partnership that dates back to 1993, so it's more than 20 years ongoing contracting of waste pickers. We have the examples of Bogota in Colombia, in which through a battle won at the Constitution Court, they were able to be hired by the city as a service provider in collection of recyclables. We have also examples from Pune, where the union KKPKP created, together with the city, cooperatives, Watch, for collection of waste. And we have Buenos Aires and the many examples that were shown earlier. And workers of the informal economy, they have also been very active as educators, as environmental stewards. And in my city, as well as in Buenos Aires, they have been engaged in doing outreach campaigns around environmental education and zero waste programs. And it is important also to highlight how they have been very active in many cities, like in Bangalore, where Hasudala has been working around plastic fair trade programs, and other examples across the world. So in our reducing waste for coastal cities, we have been documenting this. We have been mapping the value chain dynamics in each city we are working. We have been producing guidelines for EPR, for extended producers responsibility, and we have been busy in terms of providing facilitation and support to the Global Alliance of Waste Pickers, because for us, one thing that is important, that any policies designed for integration of informal workers need to have their say, need to have them at the planning table. So they have a mantra, the nothing for us without us. And we have been, in my geography in Brazil, particularly, we have been quite engaged through the Gender and Waste project that we lead here, being engaged in the global plastic dialogues, and building capacity of the waste pickers cooperatives in Brazil around being better trained for sorting of plastics. And we are now about to engage in a climate change scoping and waste pickers co-ops in Brazil to understand in which ways are they engaged with the topic, and what are the impacts that they are already experiencing in their lives around climate change events. And so, drawing to a close, I think what I said earlier about engaging with workers, representative organizations, it's key. So for us, it's very important that we advance the engagement and inclusion of workers as voices in multi-stakeholder platforms. And we need also to understand that improving solid waste management and protecting jobs of the working poor, it's key to address the problem of solid waste management in general, and plastic pollution in particular. And we need to do that by building capacity of waste pickers through gender sensitive policies and interventions. And we need to have ways, mechanisms to provide support infrastructures such as equipment, sorting centers, vehicles for collection, that workers' organizations have the means to provide their service in good conditions. It is also important for us to highlight the need to end global plastic trade, because the dumping of plastics in the global south affects local prices, harm waste pickers' income, And we would like to put forward the need for a global waste speaker fund for waste speakers organization only to support build capacity in infrastructure, something that I think the global plastic treaty should address. And yes, you can find much more about our work here, and I'll stop and I'll be happy to entertain questions. Thank you very much.
Ascension Island is a remote island in the tropical South Atlantic. In 2019, Ascension designated its 445,000 kilometers squared exclusive economic zone as a marine protected area, making the Ascension Island MPA one of the world's largest areas of highly protected ocean. It supports many species that are found nowhere else on Earth, with deep sea and open ocean habitats that remain largely untouched and unexplored, and thousands of nesting seabirds and turtles. Ascension's marine environment, however, like many other remote islands, suffers pervasive impacts of plastic pollution, both washing up on its shores and generated on the island. Ascension Island imports most food and drink packaged in single-use plastic, and there is no infrastructure for recycling this. Domestic waste is incinerated, and litter and leakage of plastic items has been identified as a real problem. Alternatives to single-use plastic are limited by cost and practicality, with exported food needing to be preserved to survive the long journey to the island. Implementing upstream measures may be challenging as consumers cannot afford the alternatives, and so while there is a desire to reduce plastics, it's not currently practical or economically feasible. To tackle pervasive plastic pollution on Ascension, we need to improve the waste management and build sustainable, locally appropriate solutions. In recent years, the Ascension Island government has surveyed and cleaned its beaches. However, a lack of capacity and resource has prevented more strategic and regular monitoring, resulting in a limited understanding of the impact of plastic pollution on Ascension. ZSL and AIG aim to co-deliver a targeted programme of work that addresses the threats of plastic pollution to the biodiversity of Ascension, whilst delivering solutions that benefit communities. This project aims to utilise local knowledge and understanding to identify opportunities and strategies to reduce single-use plastic waste.